All right. So if you looked at my previous video about why Cloudflare, and I gave you sort of the justification as to why I'm focused on Cloudflare and what it means to me, there's still another story to be told here about why Cloudflare from a financial standpoint. And that's what this video is going to be about. So first of all, just to give you some context, being a .NET developer for about 20 years, I've been through Microsoft's ups and downs with their pricing tiers and all the complexity around it. I've done AWS, I've done Google, and while those platforms, provide a lot of power, they also come with a lot of costs, and they've been rapidly shifting their model to more of a pay-as-you-go type of model as opposed to having to pre-buy all your compute upfront, and that's kind of the model that is being they're shifting to. That being said, though, they're still nowhere near sort of the price efficiency as Cloudflare, for sure. And in this video, as a newbie, if you're a newbie and you're not necessarily familiar, because there's a lot of complexities around this topic. So with this, let me just show you the graph that I have here. So right in front here, as I mentioned to you before, Cloudflare sits directly in the middle between sort of the lovable and the professional tools of the world. Okay. So if you're a professional, you're most likely sitting in this camp here. And obviously this changing, the landscape is changing. So with that, you have these new players on the block with the advent of vibe coding and where things are going. You got all these new startups that are kind of coming along, and then even the big vendors are trying to jump in on the action as well too, because everybody is sort of chasing after this buzzword of vibe coding. Lovable and Vercel and Bolt and Replit, they're all vibe coding platforms. Vercel is the one that's actually most sort of built out and have sort of a proper offering amongst these sort of vendors here. In the past, things like Firebase existed, and I specifically put Firebase a little bit closer to the developers, closer to Cloudflare. And the reason for that, it has just a little bit more technical sort of capabilities. These things are all being blurred. So this is, again, take this with a grain of salt. It's just really a mental model to kind of think about things. The new kids on the block from a database standpoint is you got Turso, which is pretty much offering roughly the same thing as what Cloudflare D1 is doing from a database standpoint. However, they have a lot more specs and a lot more size offerings in terms of details from a storage standpoint and thing. There's some limitations with Cloudflare D1 database. Supabase is another version of a database tool that's also popular, etc. And these tools, Pinecone is more for vector database, for AI type databases. These tools are really just kind of drop-in replacement for what the bigger guys are offering, but they have more efficiency in terms of spinning up a database and sort of implementing a database system, etc. So that's basically where you're seeing these new tools come into play. So from a design standpoint, you got Gemini, you got Stitch. These are Google Stitch, by the way. They're all sort of jumping into this race, and the list goes on and on and on. I just randomly picked out these tools because they're some of the most popular ones at this point in time. So from my perspective, one of the biggest benefits that I have when I'm using Cloudflare is the fact that I get to use some of these tools, Figma and Gemini and Google Stitch, to kind of focus on my design. I use Bolt for design, or Replit for design, or whatever the deal is. Vercel has a V0 for design as well too. And I'm able to kind of shove that into GitHub and then basically have Cloudflare pull that into its ecosystem and then do a deployment rapidly. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in subsequent videos. But the point here is you got sort of a mixture of camps of tools coming in the market. This is hopefully going to give you some kind of landscape of what's going on. Now, the pricing conversation is what we're here to talk about. Specifically, in the Cloudflare world, they're given basically the power of these enterprise tools, and they're bringing in some of the front-end tools. It's not necessarily a one-to-one comparison. They definitely have some database offerings similar to what the Tursos and the Supabase and the Pinecone of the world is doing. And now they're connecting you to all of the AI models all together. So if you can see what's happening is there's kind of all roads lead to Cloudflare in some regards, because they're kind of a mixture of all of the other tools that are out in the market. What's crazy about it is their pricing. They give you all of this for $5 per month. And this, if my argument as to why Cloudflare from a technology standpoint is not enough, this definitely should be, especially if you're a startup and you're just starting out. Price is just Like, you cannot beat it. There's no other company, and I will swear by this, there's no other company at this present time that is giving you this level of pricing for the value that they're provided. It's unbelievable. I question why are they doing this, and I actually know why they're doing it. I actually have a video on my channel that goes a little bit more in depth with this, but for the most part, there's a lot of power that they're giving you for just $5 a month. So what I actually did is I actually went to ChatGPT, and again, you got to take this stuff with a grain of salt, but it's really just to kind of give you some idea in comparison of some numbers to understand how good of a service this is. So if you were to do 10 million requests per month, right, comparing this to some of the other vendors, and again, there's always little gray areas here, but this should give you sort of a high level overview to kind of how to think about this. 10 million requests. API level, we'll talk about that in a bit, and a database, right? So with some light JSON, so it's just sort of a rough estimation, right? Cloudflare is at $5 per month flat, okay? Everybody else at this $10 million per month, I'll show you the pricing in a bit, but every other company, this is where it says here, their flat free tier disappear. So I want to give you some comparison. If you're just starting out, the free tiers for all the other cloud providers looks appealing at surface level. If you were to just do a dramatically smaller application at 100,000 requests per month, Cloudflare is still at $5. The other platforms, some of them are sitting at $0 and some of them are sitting around $25, $30, but nobody is going over 25. It might hover around like $30 at max. At the lowest level, when you're just starting out, all of the vendors look like they're on par with each other. However, if you scale that up dramatically, where you start to get into more the enterprise level world, you're starting to shift into this territory where you need a lot of volume, Cloudflare just holds its pricing at $5 per month. Every other vendor, the pricing dramatically increases, right? $5, $75, $20 to $100. It really just depends on the volume and what's going on. So that pricing, that savings that you're getting at the start, it's essentially just a sort of like a, what they call I don't even know what the word to describe it, other than it's just a, it's just a lower in, just lower you in, get you in the door. And then once you're locked into ecosystem, suddenly the prices start raising on the back end. Cloudflare is the only vendor that does not have this sort of lock-in at that scale. Now, there's some caveats with Cloudflare because you do get a vendor lock-in based on the fact that all their platforms, all their solutions are very tightly integrated. That's a different conversation. We're just focusing on the pricing. And the reality is that no other vendor can compete at that level. I did a video on my channel specifically about the backgrounds and the inner workings of Cloudflare. It's not necessarily a technical video, but it just kind of gives you some overview or high traffic or whatever it is. So if you look here on my channel and you do a search for Cloudflare, you will find a video that says why Cloudflare in 2025, a developer's take. And this video basically gives you a very high level overview of more details around my justification, what's going on, and it walks you through not only the positioning, but it also gives you a more in-depth overview of how Cloudflare is able to manage this extremely low pricing. And the reality is there's no other cloud vendor that has this sort of unique tool set that can provide this sort of super efficient way of doing cloud resources. This is the reason why I've started making the shift, because after I started getting these extremely expensive bills from Azure and some of the bigger cloud providers, I needed to find a way to make my startup business more efficient and more sustainable. And so that's the reason why I got into Cloudflare. And as a result of that, I've been sort of hyper focused on it. And as they start building out more technologies, I decided to just double down. So that's just a sort of a reason from a financial standpoint. Again, it's not sort of like, a full on, in-depth sort of price comparison type video. Is not intended to do that. But the reality is that you go look at any of the other cloud vendors, and you will see they have their $0 pricing, but the minute you jump up, you're going to be in this around $24 or so, and then it quickly jumps up from there. So you get this bit of a lock-in here, right? You start at $25. On the free level, there's some value there, but I'm not comparing the free, I'm just comparing what you actually get from these vendors. So $20 a month, it seems attractive until you start understanding the real details of what's going to be required to build a scalable architecture. And then you realize that Cloudflare altogether has by far the best pricing model, period. And with that, I'll see you in another video.